Hi, my name is Noah Talerman, and I'm going to be talking about the blank slate gap in sales. So, the overarching thesis or summary of this talk is that sales helps bridge the blank slate gap by providing both a suggested output and clear scaffolding. So, before I get into the meat of the presentation, I'm going to introduce myself as a person, as a human. My name is Noah Talerman again. I grew up on an island outside of Seattle called Mercer Island, and I recently moved to Brooklyn, so I made the west coast of the U.S. to east coast jump, and I am paying for it in terms of the humidity. We'll rent as well, but I'm getting used to that East Coast heat. What do? I work at Fleet Device Management. We are a team of 8. My title is product. Because we are so small, I do not fill the role of a product manager or someone with the title product at a large organization or company. I do a lot of different things. I write documentation. I do write code some days. I work on wireframing. I work on project management type tasks. And again, I do write some code, so I have some technical acumen, although I am relatively new to software. Jumping back into the talk, this is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to try to convince you that sales helps bridge the blank slate gap. My audience today is, of course, the sales community and those attending SalesConf, but also the talk is geared slightly towards my friends and family as well. So this is the result of some learnings I took out of a past project in which I wrote an economics paper in undergrad. I was an econ major in college, university, whatever you might call it. And I wrote an extremely, almost overly technical paper that got some recognition, so my friends and family asked me to send it around. I couldn't have a conversation with them about it. I went to reread it myself, and I couldn't really understand what I was trying to communicate in the mess of formulas and equations and overly technical verbiage. So this is my redemption. This is an attempt to introduce a technical topic in sales and be able to have conversations with those that are both new to sales, may have never heard of sales before, and have those conversations with my friends and family. So jumping into the summary of the talk, I'm going to introduce what the heck the blank slate gap is. I've been dropping this 3-word term like you're expected to know what it is. You are definitely not, so I'm going to introduce where I heard of this and what I think it means. Next, I'm going to talk about how sales helps bridge the blank slate gap. And lastly, I'm going to attempt to project some of the learnings from sales on how we might apply sales success in bridging the blank slate gap at work, specifically working with a team. So what is the blank slate gap? I first heard of this on a podcast in which I.O. Mojla was interviewed, so I'm going to credit him with first this quote, and I'm also going to credit him with the term the blank slate gap, as I tried to Google it and find other examples of its use to no avail. So thank you, I.O. Mojla. He defines the blank slate gap as something that occurs when you procrastinate just because you don't know how something will look in the end. So I tried to recreate this situation with the stick figure and a cloud to the right. So if we imagine the cloud as the thing that we want to produce, and we imagine the line with the question mark as how we're going to get to what we want to produce, this is a visual representation that I attempted to create of the blank slate gap. And I've extrapolated I.O. Modula's quote and definition as the blank slate gap being the gap between knowing what you want to produce, so that cloud, and knowing what work is required to get you there, so that line with the question mark. He argues that this occurs in a lot of creative work because often the output or what you want to produce is unclear, so you're going to wait until the very end to produce something. But I'm going to argue that this blank slate gap potentially occurs in a lot of work, not just work that we deem creative work, although you could argue that most work is creative work. So how does software apply to the blank slate gap? Let's take the example of wanting to build a website. So I know what I want to produce, roughly. I know I want to build a website, but I don't know what language I want to write the code in. I'm not sure how I want to organize my code. I'm not clear on how I want the website to look and behave. I also don't know what the URL will be. I could name it superslicktool.io or Noah's greatest invention.tech. There's a lot of unanswered questions. The first one being, what do I want to produce and what do I want this to look like? And the second overarching question of how can I get there? So this applies to sales, and I'm going to introduce sales for those that are less familiar now. Sales is a code template for building websites. So imagine, this might not be the best example, but imagine a Google Doc resume template. So if you go to Google Docs, there's a bunch of resume templates that you can choose from, and they have an empty design where you can insert your name, insert your phone number, insert your work experience. So sales, while that's not the best example, sales provides a template for how you should organize and lay out your code to accomplish building a website. So sales provides the initial files, sales provides a bunch of the plumbing or middleware that is required to get the website up and running, and then it's up to you to customize and mold that code into the output or the website that you would like to produce. So I'm going to argue that sales helps bridge the blank slate gap by providing two things. The first being suggested output, and the second being clear scaffolding. So the first, suggested output, accomplishes that first question on what do we want to produce, what do we want this to look like. The second item, clear scaffolding, helps answer the question of how do we get to what we want to produce. And specifically sales and the suggested output. Sales provides a frame for your website. So again, it immediately gives you a visual as well as code template for what you want to produce. So it answers this what question. Our blob in my illustration, if we remember back, has now turned into a star. So sales helps the initial molding of that blob or that final output and turns it into something more coherent immediately for us. So that blob has now become a star. we've answered that first question. And the remaining item is, what are the steps that we have to take to get to producing that output? And sales accomplishes, I actually jumped ahead. This is a specific example of sales providing that suggested output. In this video, I'm running the command sales new, so that generates a new sales project with just one command in that terminal window that I've opened. And then I can run sales lift, and right away, when I open my browser, I have a fully functioning website with login, sign up, and the home page right away. So sales right away gives me the suggested output. Here's a website. I know this is what I want to create eventually. So now I can mold it and cater this website to what specifically I'm trying to accomplish, whether that be something simple like a to-do list or something more complex like a two-sided marketplace. So the next item, or our next question, is, again, I skipped ahead actually. So let's compare the suggested output, the success of sales providing a suggested output, to another website building tool, React. This framework or library is quite popular. It has different use cases than sales. However, it's a good example of a tool that provides neither a suggested output nor the steps to get there, or clear scaffolding. So React as a tool, if we check out my example, provides neither of these things. I'm running the React equivalent of sales new now. I'm creating a new project with the React tool instead of sales. So when I fire this React website up first after generating a new project, I'm just going to get a blank page with a link to the React documentation. So React spits out less than a functioning website, very much less, and it does not provide clear scaffolding for how to reach that output. So in a couple seconds, we should see that React page, if I could type a little bit faster. And I should have provided an example of the code as well to indicate that scaffolding, but I did not. So here, when I correctly navigate, there it is. So this is the React page that you see, just has a spinning animation of their logo, no functioning website, no clear out or suggested output. So the next thing that sales does to successfully bridge the blank slate gap is sales provides guidance on structuring your code and working with the required tools to get you to that output of a functioning website. So now, if we return to the illustration, we both have the blob that's transformed into a star because we have our suggested output, and we also have removed the question mark because sales provides the steps or the clear scaffolding to get you to that suggested output or to that desired output. So this one example of sales accomplishing this is the production.js file. So this is a JavaScript file. Right away, sales provides clear and concise instructions. The green lines are commented out code, so they're not actually executed. They're just there for instruction and walking through how to exactly work with the code and how to accomplish reaching your final output. This specific example is about wiring sales up with a database. I'm going to uncomment that code, and right away, after editing some database credentials, Sales is ready to work with a production database. So Sales here is providing clear instruction, so clear scaffolding, and it's providing the structure, which again is part of the scaffolding to accomplish that desired output. So again, let's contrast this with another website building tool, Django, one that might be more comparable to Sales. Don't quote me on this, as I'm still quite new to the software world. But Django, I argue, successfully accomplishes providing a suggested output. So we have our blob turned into a star on the right, but Django does not, unlike Sales, provide clear scaffolding or guidance on reaching that desired output. So this video demonstrates me running the Django equivalent of Sales New again. I'm creating a new project with the Django tool, and a little bit later in the video you'll see me navigate to the web page, which will look similar to the React web page. But I argue that Django takes it a bit further in providing the suggested output. So you'll see me pull up the code or the production.js equivalent for Django, and there will be scaffolding in terms of how you might set up a production database, but there will be no instruction. So the instruction points you to the Django documentation, while this instruction in Sales actually lives in the code. So Django doesn't take it to the heights that Sales does in terms of providing the clear scaffolding, and we will see that in a moment soon. I should have sped up these videos. I'm also haven't worked with Django for a while, so I tried to connect incorrectly. So there's the website. It gives you direction to some examples, some documentation. And if I open the code, I will see a file in which I can configure the database. But if we remember what the file production.js in Sales looked like, there was the 1, 2, 3 steps, a lot of commented out code that provided the instruction right in the file in which we wanted to change. So I'm going to scroll. There's that databases section, and Django points us to their documentation, while Sales actually provides the documentation or provides some sort of instruction in this file directly. So Django almost accomplishes bridging the blank slate gap as Sales does. However, it does not provide a clear way of getting to the desired output. So how can we apply the learnings from Sales and its success in bridging the blank slate gap at work, and how can we apply this to working with other teams? So in terms of the suggested output, the goal here is reducing, again, the time to figure out what to produce. If we can define some sort of rough output on what we want the artifact or what we want the work to look like, then we can reduce the time figuring out answering this question. By providing clear scaffolding, we can reduce the time figuring out how to get to that desired output. And if we can achieve both of these goals, we hopefully have maximized the time spent producing. So I believe this is beneficial from my short work experience so far, as if we are able to maximize the time spent producing, say, for an engineer or someone skilled in writing or someone skilled in creating web designs, they can maximize the time spent doing that, or or performing that skill rather than spending a lot of time figuring out what that final output should be and how they should get there. So instead, they're applying they or I'm applying the skills for the most amount of time and producing potentially a high quality output. So I'm going to provide a quick example from my work. And this example is specifically about updating an empty state in the UI. So I'm going to explain both of these terms before I continue. An empty state, an example of an empty state, let's imagine you haven't set your profile picture on a website. So often you'll see a grayed out outline of a head or some default avatar, something non-specific because you have yet to edit that. That is an empty state. And the UI is the user interface, so what is visually displayed on the screen and what you as a user interact with to accomplish something on the website, say a button or a text field where you enter your username and password. So in this example, I have attempted to suggest the output for updating the empty state UI by outlining these goals. So these screenshots are from GitHub. We use GitHub at Fleet to do most of our work. And the significant portion of our work is public, so everything I'm showing is not confidential. The first goal that I outline is make the adding a query the primary action. So here I'm attempting to provide more detail into what the suggested output or what the output I'm suggesting to look like. And I also provide some instruction on improving the legibility of the empty state text. And I specified that there's no need to change the copy in this pass. So there's no need to update the actual verbiage used in the user interface. So I could have gone a bit farther in explaining and trying to shape that final output. And this looks quite similar to how I imagine the spec for certain tasks or the requirements for certain software tasks looking. And we can attempt to provide this suggested output by being clear on what the end or that output should look like, and specifying what it should not look like, I think also helps mold that final output. So the individual, whether it's me or someone else tasked with doing the work, can do the final molding of that output with the supplied requirements. And then if we hop into the clear scaffolding piece, so removing that question mark from the line, attempting to provide steps to get to that clear output, I would try to accomplish this by specifying how we're going to get to that goal. The first one being updating the empty state, and then the second one being actually writing the code and submitting a PR or a pull request to the code. And I attempted to take the clear scaffolding a step further by describing what to do with the work after a portion of it is finished. So I blocked out the names, but the idea here is that I'm attempting to add clarity on what one individual could do after accomplishing their portion of the overarching goal. So often what I've discovered working in a growing team is that there's the benefits of working in a team are the skills are distributed, there's different opinions on specific topics. So when these skills are distributed, there's a significant amount of times work has to be handed off to accomplish a higher goal. So providing some explanation as to who an individual might want to hand this off to, or who is going to take the task to the next step or to the next level, helps add this scaffolding. So you're answering the how do we get to that final output question. There are a couple of warnings that I want to add in, and a couple of things that I think about when working with a team and when thinking about bridging this blank slate gap. There's the concern of overstepping, so too clearly defining that final output. You don't want to, especially when working with individuals that have a higher level of skill in accomplishing the specific task. You don't want to either narrow the approach or narrow the output. So narrowing the approach would coincide with narrowing the steps to get there. By outlining these steps, I think I would be either intentionally or unintentionally narrowing the amount of paths an individual could take to accomplish a certain goal. So there's a balance in terms of providing clear scaffolding or helping and accelerating and maximizing the amount of time an individual spends actually working on the task. And then there is also narrowing the output. So this would be providing too specific of an output in terms of narrowing what the end product or what the output potentially looks like. The benefits of working on a growing team, again, are that there's a significant or wide array of thoughts and opinions, and often by providing too specific of an output, we can unintentionally narrow some of the solutions or some of the thoughts that our teammates might have, and unintentionally prevent those better or more enjoyable to work on solutions from occurring. So to recap, I've attempted to argue that sales helps bridge the blank slate gap by providing one suggested output and two clear scaffolding. I provided some examples of other website building tools that fail to do one or both of these things, and the blank slate gap as seen with sales can literally be applied to building a website, but we can also take some of those learnings and abstract them into lessons for working as a team. Thank you.